time is a temporal marker of change. That's it. Time is speeding up, and our perception of it is failing to keep up with it.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazaza, the author of Training with a Seal. You can now read the first few chapters on our Substack, so make sure you check that out. Today's guest is no stranger to the show. He's trained special forces, works as an energy healer, a modern day medicine man, and an artist. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so excited to have Randy Veitenheimer back on the show. Randy, thank you so much for being here.
It's good to see you again.
You as well. So I had to bring you on the show.
I was kind of like, who is that person, right? So,
I had to bring you on because I thought you had a really cool top. Well, I thought you'd be the person to ask this topic for. And, I was I was thinking about time. And I was like, man, it's flying. Like, it is just like the day is just over the moment I open up my eyes. And I'm just like, this can't be normal. Like, this is not, or I guess it's normal to today, right? But this isn't like the time that I just feel like it's just, you blink, it's just over. It's just moving too fast. And I wanted to talk to you about that.
thank you for the question, because it's something that, like, I think we'd need several days and a pile of books to get through. Your observation is correct. One or two things: either our perception of time has changed, or time itself has changed. Jump in the middle of it, I would say that both of those are true. I tried to figure out how I could make this clear. I come up with music. People out there can write these down. Chicago, does anybody really know what time it is? Was the song I wrote. So that becomes the first problem. We really don't know what time it is, and we really don't know what day it is. It's like we have adopted standard, what I call marker, temporal marker, and said that basically the calendar started 2,000 years ago, and the Chinese 4,700 years ago, and the Israel. I mean, it's although every civilization has a different idea of when the calendar started. The Mayans, I mean, all around the world. And then we get the same problem with time. When did time start? Who the heck decided that, it's midnight or it's 12 noon? And of course, they do all the experiments and everything, but all they've done is give us a technical point of view based on numbers. That's it. So what that means is that, like, the Hittites were the ones that first come up with what we call a base 60 program in math. And base 60 ends up being how we divide a circle up 360 degrees. And then how we also divide it by 24 or 12 or all these other numbers. And we end up with 60-minute hours and all kinds of things that come out of that system. And basically, that's a system everybody uses, and that's the basis for our clocks and watches and everything else in the world. There's only one problem with that. It's not true, except for where you're standing. Now we have time zones. Anybody really know what time it is? Well, it depends on where you're at. And that is a real problem, that time would be what we call locally based. And again, I'm skipping over the implications of each of these statements because they take forever to get through.
Do you feel like the days are going super fast compared to when you were younger, like childhood and stuff?
I think let's go to perception first. Temporal markers and spatial markers. Spatial markers is what we use to determine if time has passed. And what that means is we see something. We observe something has changed. So really, time is a temporal marker of change. That's it. But if you think back, like, I was born a long time ago, far, far away, we didn't have a lot of markers for what time was. You went to school, obviously 8:30, got out at 3:30 or something. But after that, you didn't have one. You didn't wear a watch back then. There weren't clocks everywhere. You weren't interacting with people in a way that you would notice what time it was. The temporal marker was when the sun went down. Very simple. And so we didn't have, or didn't notice particularly rates of change in time. It was pretty consistently this. Okay. And so, since there was no event to make it stand out, we didn't incorporate any sense that time had variability. We knew that because I lived on Indian time, and Indian time is not the same as regular people's time. Anybody will tell you that, right? So Indian time equates to LA time. I'll see you at an appointment at 10 a.m. means I'll get there sometime between 9:30 and 1 o'clock. Well, that's Indian time. So they apparently adopted that in California.
In
We have,
South Carolina, they don't even show up.
yeah, yeah. So that might mean tomorrow. And then we have a New York minute. And the implication of that was that a New York minute was faster than a regular minute. And that's the first time I ever heard the concept of time being shortened. So now here we go. Time gets shortened because of what we're doing. So our perception of time is malleable depending on how many events you cram into it. And so, like you say, I get to the end of the day. Why? You've crammed a lot of events into this day. If you were a kid like me going to school and get out and lay on the porch for an hour or two before supper was ready or something. We weren't allowed in the house. That's why we lay around.
Do you think like if I was, I don't know, like if I didn't have this busy life, but I had more like if I was like in jail or something like that, God forbid,
Yeah.
right? Like can you think that the day would be like the longest day of my or like you're in solitary confinement or like, you're like in just a horrible day of life. That's a long day versus, a day, a Gina day.
Yeah. If you don't put as much into it, it slows down.
I feel like sometimes when I do have a rest day, the
Yeah.
day's gone already too. Maybe also too, I'm like, or like I'm still doing something is like I'm either reading or, even just being on my phone. Forget about that. Like that just the day's
Right.
gone if I don't stop.
Yeah. If you're doom scrolling, you're literally making events in the time stream is the language we'll use. And then we'll expand that into what we call an event stream, which includes space. Space and time together creates an event stream. And what that means is that we can go out so far, let's say an hour from now, and that doesn't really exist for us. We can go back 10 minutes ago, and that's really doesn't exist anymore. So we're forward leaning in our experience of time. And the more, like, if you looked at how many times you scrolled through, like the internet on Facebook or anything, each of those represents what we call a temporal marker. And you just packed 1,000 of them in an hour of doom scrolling, for instance. And not that you do that or anybody else does, but what you've done is alerted your consciousness that things are changing at a rapid rate. How much rapid? Like a blink rate. That's what they do on advertisement now, or videos like MTV videos are based on blink rate. So you take all that together and it becomes perceptual time has basically moved faster now.
So you'd say because we're entering in this digital age,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just it's just exponentially faster.
Yeah.
And how do we like, I notice from people talking, even myself, if you know from me talking to you, that people are like getting sad by this. It's like, oh my goodness, like that's
Yeah.
it. Like I spend time with my nephew and, 3.5, and I'm like, before you know he's 10, before you know it,
Yeah.
I'm dead. And then, it just kind of takes over, you think about it, but it's sometimes hard to just let it pass. It just is
Right.
kind of like taking over like Debbie Downing my emotions.
We really don't know how to deal with. You got to excuse me a minute.
No problem. We edit this, so don't worry.
Okay. We really don't have experience with the rate of change that's going on in today's environment because of the amount of inputs we have that give us a constant input and rate of change greater than that which we can assimilate or interact with there. What that means is that we perceptually are behind in our ability to recognize and encompass change in the events and seconds of our life, we'll call it. If we get into not just the perceptual, but the actual reality of time, then there is some indication through CERN and other activities out there that what we call the fabric of time has actually, well, they've done studies that it's actually mutable. In other words, that there are instances of being able to slow it down or speed it up. We have no concept of what that looks like, back to that again, but we have a sense of it. We have a sense that things are not the way they were, which they never are, but they're different in a way that we can't accommodate, I guess would be the best way. So we end up now with, if you want to know the basis of time, you read Alice in Wonderland. That's the easiest way to figure out time and space because most time and space in that book are highly mutable. Now, how they got there is different, but one of the things we do know is that the ingestion of drugs, hallucinogenics, mushrooms, and a dozen other things alters your time perception. The trick becomes, does it really alter time itself? And so that's something that, like I said, this would take days for me to unwrap, but there's some indication that it does. It indicates that there is such a thing as local time. Remember where you are. We're back to that again. So taking all that into account, yes, time is speeding up and our perception of it is failing to keep up with it. So there becomes the sadness or the recollection
Hmm.
that time is different from maybe a year ago or 10 years ago or 30 years ago. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Time is an entirely different thing from when I was a kid.
It definitely, it's funny because sometimes it does help me with business and stuff because I have this big event coming up
Mhm.
and it's just me putting this on. There's like 1,000 people coming to this event
Right.
and it's a Battle of the Cake event and bakers were backing out. The band wasn't responding to me. I couldn't get the insurance. Just epic fails. I was getting a migraine and I was like, you know what? I lost the war today. I have to go to bed. Like tomorrow's another day, right? And then
Right.
I wake up and I'm able to like salvage some stuff. And I was like, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. This event's gonna come and go. Like that's it. Like, and I have to just think about what's next. This is not my end all be all. And it does help me to also, as you've taught me so much, and I finally said, "Oh, I think I got it." Well, this time I got it. I was able to really take my emotion out of it all, because I was getting stressed, I was getting emotional. I was like, "Stop. None of this matters. We don't need to be emotional. We don't need this emotion involved in this part of the business, right? It's not helping. So let it, like just stay neutral." And I've been focusing on learning how to stay neutral, which allows me to not be in the past or that mindset.
The basic trait that we might use to accommodate what's going on is the concept of harmony. Problem with that is harmony with what or when. So what happens is that now we introduce the idea of a timeline. And so if we extend a timeline, like I'm driving to Dallas or you're going to put on an event, the timeline's always reorganizing itself. You can set in motion a goal or an objective, and you can put all the pieces together, but they are in a constant state of reorganization. We recognize that. The problem is you have to get your emotions out of it to be able to accept that and ultimately end up in what we call a state of serenity. So it's not just harmony. Harmony means you're going along with it, but a state of serenity is one of acceptance of whatever occurs out of that timeline. The other problem is we have hundreds of timelines that are ongoing. You set them up when your mother or father wanted you to go to college or wanted you to do this, or I mean, there's all these timelines that got laid onto people, and they don't recognize that a lot of them are still running. you're still trying to fulfill that timeline that somebody gave you. And then ultimately have a timeline of being born and dying, and nobody knows what the hell that one looks like and where it came from. Nobody can tell you where did the timeline of being born and dying come from? There's no answer that I've been able to find at this time. Got that at this time.
I actually had a question, but now I have a new question. This is just a, I guess this is your own opinion, I guess, is there's so many different things that people have beliefs to or opinions to where they're like, you know, you have a you're born at a time and like you have a death time. You have a time
Yeah,
where you're dying. Like that's it. And then other people are like, no, that changes. That could change, right? Where you
right,
can have different times. And some people are like, no, that's the day and time. And there was this book I read. It was interesting. I mentioned it to you and you were like, um,
right.
it was like a book about this, like, I guess, like, I don't know what they're called, like psychic, I guess is what they're called. I don't know. She would read your, like, why you came into this world, like
Right.
what your purpose was and something like that, and the purpose of each person in your life, right? And she did like a whole, she would like dive into like the round table of
Right.
why you were here and who the people are and what they were supposed to teach you and all this other stuff. And so I'm just curious in terms of where you fall in all this. Like you think that there's a set time, like you're def or do you think like that could change?
No, because even your own timeline is constantly reorganized in itself, depending on where you're at,
Hmm.
what you're doing, who you know. I mean, the vectors involved, the change in that are like incredible. This, so even if you identify one, like I was born a Scorpio or something, is that a vector of a timeline? Is that a factor in how I move through life or what I become or how many times I'm married? I mean, so what we do is a whole lot of association. And for some reason, people find certain items like that, psychics, all this stuff, comforting, and others find them uncomfortable. There's been enough movies and science fiction books written about all this. The idea of prefogs, the Minority Report. Also, there was a series of books. I'm probably got it wrong. 1631 is a book about. I think Eric Schmidt wrote it. It's about an area of Connecticut or somewhere that gets moved back in time 300 or 400 years, and they've got all the technology that we have at present moved back to that timeline. And the series of books deals with what happens about how the introduction of what would be future technology gets dropped into the past. And of course, when I was a kid, the first exposure to this was a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, and it's a book I think worth reading for anybody. And it's the idea that you had this curmudgeon from Connecticut that gets dropped back again 200 or 300 years into Mario, England. And then the hilarity ensues. I mean, Michael Crichton wrote a book about it, timelines. It's the same premise, the same story. If we look at it, then it's true today too, in the standpoint that if you live in New York City, then your experiences of living in New Mexico and the backwoods of Arkansas, Oklahoma, a few other places, is going to resemble time travel. So now we're into that. You're living in another day and age, and if you don't believe it, just go there. You'll find out pretty quick. Now we have time travel, timelines. We have all these things, and all centered around the idea that you know what time it is. That's it.
I
Right?
read something yesterday where they were saying go to bed and like the last couple of seconds before you go to bed, like think of, I guess, close your eyes and feel and see what it is that you want. So, like, I guess for me, I have 6,000 things going on, right?
Yeah.
And pick one right? And close your eyes and see it and whatever, and then go to sleep. And then they were saying that that would help speed up your timeline to get there. Is that true? Because I'll
Oh.
do that tonight.
Well, there's some indication the universe doesn't respect the intellect or information. We think about all the information we generate and its effect on time or space, and there doesn't appear to be a very high correlation. Now, unless we go to magic. So now we're into historically referred thaumaturgy or magic, whatever you want to call it. And it shows up in the martial arts, believe it or not. One of the first things you learn in martial arts that when you're in the middle of a fight, there's a thing called time dilation, and it's very real. I mean, time slows down to the point that you can, it's kind of like in the movies where they show slow motion events happening,
Yeah.
like a punch coming or a bullet,
Hmm.
or whatever. And really, that's exactly what happens. We go into a perceptual state that time becomes infinitely expanded to the point you can sit there and watch it. You know, you can watch the bullet go by kind of thing that you would never do otherwise. And it revolves around a concept of a moment, moment. You can look up on the dictionary, but let's call it 1/20th of a second. At 1/20th of a second, below that, you don't experience it. We don't have the ability as a human, as a rule, to experience less than 1/20th of a second at a time. But we were given exercises, like when you're exercising, doing martial arts training, at some point you learn to do slow motion exercise. And the idea behind them is that you would learn to be able to interact with time in a way to speed it up or slow it down. And so that became a form of magic. Don't know how to pronounce the original words. JAHO with a little mark over the H was the Chinese form of that. And it was a practice. In other words, you practice being able to either speed up or slow down time around you. And then the magic part, you did it to whoever you were facing as an opponent. You would literally speed up their time or slow it down. And this is a basic thing in some pretty what we call secret stuff in acupuncture and Chinese martial arts that really nobody that I know teaches it anymore. I just kind of got lucky, you might say, to be able to stay with people who taught me some of this. If we had to pick a weapon, time is the greatest one in the world. And that's why my ultimate martial arts is real simple. Just don't be there. Because if you miss something by a second or a minute or an hour, you think about I showed up late to the volcano going off. I showed up late to the car wreck or whatever. It means you didn't experience that. And that is very much of people that like take a detour when right ahead of them would have been an accident. So at that time, they're time interactive. They're actually time interactive. So the idea of the ultimate martial art not being there is real simple.
Hmm.
Is if you can alter your time that you arrive somewhere, you have literally time traveled. And so I had a friend that was a physicist back in the 60s and stuff, and we brought up the topic of time travel, and he said, "Well, have you ever gone somewhere and instead of driving 60 miles an hour, you drove 70 or 80?" And I go, "Well, yeah." He goes, "Well, you time traveled. If you were supposed to arrive somewhere, let's say we're like Siri or something will tell you, oh, you arrive in 1 hour. If
Right.
you arrive there in 45 minutes, you have time travel. You
Mm.
have arrived in a series of events that were going on that you would have missed if you had gone the speed limit. That gets really crazy now when you're driving. But the idea is real simple. When I get on the airplane to travel, I'm time traveling. And when I was 18, I got on a plane and flew to LA. I left at 7:03 and got there at 7:13 or something. At the time, there's that again. I couldn't figure that out. I mean, I knew about time zones and stuff, remember where you are, but you have literally traveled through time at that point. We just don't consider it that way. That's why this thing was so crazy when you said, let's do time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been wrestling with this for 50 years or 60 more, maybe.
I'm just finding it so like being a mindset show. My mindset these days is all about, well, I've so many different things where it's like part of me is just like, who cares? Like nobody is shooting at me is what I keep telling myself. Like
Right.
nobody's shooting at me right now. Like it's not that big of a deal, right? But then as well, I'm like, I don't think I'm struggling with my mindset in terms of I do so many things and the day is over and I go, well, that's why this business is where it is. And that's why this business is where it is. And, there's just not enough time for you to focus on this, and this to help it move forward. And obviously one person can't, but at the same time, well, if I had more time, I could. But I, but that's what I've been struggling with a lot, especially because I'm at this point where I go, at what point do I give my time to all of this or all of that instead of the diversity? Because A, would that help me to get to the next point and then be able to go back because then I could get some help and I could, because to me lately, time is just and
Yeah.
that's messing with my mind. I'm just like, I can't, I can't.
The language I use is that your frame of mind equals your frame of time. You include in your frame of mind multiple things to do. Time has to speed up to accommodate all that. It speeds up in anticipation or assumption is a better language of the
Okay.
outcome. So what you do, you pile up a bunch of assumptions. If I do this, this will happen. The emotional psychological trick was go, I'll do this and I'll see what happens. Remember that serenity thing? We very much are locked into our own tempo. That's what it's called in special forces stuff fighting. And the idea is that you reach a baseline, and from that baseline, you can up tempo or down tempo. So you become the regulator of whether you speed things up or slow things down. That what comes out of that is if something slows down, the mind wants to jump to something that's speeding up. We have an affinity for things that go fast. I learned,
Yeah. I'm in New York Minute all the time.
yeah, you learn in high school, it's like what do they call it? Older whiskey, faster cars, and something. Anyway, I'm sure I've got that wrong. Something about faster women was involved in that. So the idea is that you would identify, first of all, if you want any help with it, is you'd identify your tempo baseline. And so what that means is how many things can I do in a day?
Hmm.
And ultimately, it comes down to decisions. How many decisions or choices can I make in a day? So what you find is people can make, let's say, 200 or 2,000, whatever it is. And then at some point, like, that's it. I'm out of the ability to make any more choices or decisions. We call that being tired or the end of the day. So another trick there is to learn how to make decisions on a different timeline or subject. The reason being, when we keep cycling, going from one to the next, one to the next, we're not as worn out when we approach a new timeline or setting a new goal or things like that. We become excited. And then from that, we get energy and we go until that gives out. And then most people at that point, let's say, would rest, but you might be of the temperament that, oh no, now I need to jump to another one that provides that excitement. And now we have the basis for what they call, what is that stuff? Dopamine rush that comes from doom scrolling. As I jump from each thing, I have an assumption or anticipation of something that's going to make me go, wow, right? Or ooh, or look at that, or, you know.
I will
You-
say for myself, like the moment I wake up in the morning,
yeah,
I like need to touch my computer. Like I need to be working, right? And part of me is like, no, I need to the stretching that you tell me to do. And
right.
I need to drink water and go to the gym and go for a walk outside. And every single time I do that until I am anxious until I hit my computer. And
Right.
I'm just like, it's nuts to me because I'm really focusing on reframing myself to like be more like you said to me, like you need to do more for you, like go for a walk, go outside and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And it just gets me more anxious to get to the computer, which is nuts.
Yeah, it's like the movie Trading Places. At the end, they're on the trading floor and everybody's going nuts around them, and then all of a sudden it goes to chill, goes to absolute zero. Why? Because they're waiting for tick, 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 9 o'clock, and it's like 9 o'clock, wham, right? It explodes, and then at 3:30, oh, that's it. Let's go get dinner, have a drink, whatever. That is actually an accurate representation, being able to go into battle, we'll call it, and then be able to come out of it. Most people don't know how to come out of battle. And so what they do, they worry about it before the battle and worry about it after the battle. And like what we're saying is don't do that. Find a stop point. Remember, put brackets on it. You get to decide. Do you want to go to work at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 7, 4? It doesn't make any difference. But everybody will pick a time to start. Nobody picks a time to stop. It's just open-ended. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm going to devote, let's say, 4 hours a day working, 6 hours, 8 hours. I don't care. But after that time, you've lost that time and now only have a certain amount of time available to you for yourself or family or things like
Mhm.
that. And now we get into really what's important to you. We say you will be, let's say, 10 years older at some point from today. The question is, what kind of shape are you going to be in? I mean that mental, physical, emotional, everything. By examining all this, what we're talking about, you should be able to come up a way to regulate yourself. And so that's what we call it, regulate time.
What are some ways to regulate?
One of the basic ones is through breathing. We inhale and exhale. And we teach it as you inhale for 1 count, exhale 1 count, then 2 counts. Inhale 2 counts, exhale 2 counts. And then you go inhale 2 counts, hold 2 counts, exhale 2 counts, inhale 2 counts, hold 2 counts, exhale 2 counts, and then hold 2 counts. That's called regulated breathing. What it does is it puts you in contact with the idea of temporal timelines within the body and how you're interacting. You can go up to 3 counts or 30 counts. I've done a 30 count once in my life, I think. And that's a fascinating exercise. Then you get into the exercises of regulating your heart rate, your blood pressure. These are all internal martial arts. And that was their purpose, is to teach you about yourself. It wasn't, and out of that comes understanding the universe. And now we have Taoism. So breathing exercises are the easiest way to experience how you experience time. Your internal clock of saying inhale 1, 2, 3, or 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. That's how we learned it as far
Just
as
so you know, as you say it,
yeah,
my internal clock is going, speed it up.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
And
too slow.
if you run at a faster internal clock, anybody else doing 1 Mississippi is going to make you crazy.
Yeah.
Because your speed of processing all that information is literally jumping ahead of where they're at.
Okay, let me ask you though, when you said that, because now I watch everything.
Mhm.
Netflix, if I'm gonna put something on, reading a book, 2 times speed. I'm at 3 times speed. Which is like I try 4, but 4 is like not for me right now. But a 2 times speed is normal speed, and if you notice, I pretty much talk at 2 times speed, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Like this time thing is literally affecting my entire
No,
everything.
it's true. I have a woman I've worked with for about 15 or 20 years. To me, she does what I call valley speak. In other words, like in LA, it's like somebody goes 100 miles an hour. Literally understand that she is like having the thoughts and expressing the words at a speed greater than what I can process. So at a certain level, she's not talking fast. Or people from New York, they talk fast. Well, you're in Louisiana or Georgia, it's 1 Mississippi, 2. And in New York, like say, what is it?
Yeah.
It's not. Unless you've experienced that, you really have no idea of your what I refer to as a fundamental tempo line.
Now,
And
would you say, because you just said experience, would that say that comes from self-awareness?
yeah, well, you have to be in a different environment. In other words, you have to expand the brackets to include the fact that If you're in New York City, you need to speak faster. And if you're in, Arkansas, you need to speak slower. In South Louisiana, way slower. Or people are just not going to be able to relate to you at all. Everything we do is time related. The nice little touch on all that, last touch, is that, like in the movie Lucy, she's talking about at the very end about how you see a car going around a track, and as it speeds up, it finally disappears. Well, it disappears because you can no longer process the movement. So you're processing time at a faster rate than people around you, so time moves fast. So it's not only individual, it's also group time. And it's also geologic or geomorphic time, meaning depending on the state you're in, literally, mentally, and physically. And that's why we say that time is different in Louisiana. It's different on the reservation. Everybody will tell you that. Ultimately, I address it all in what I call 10 Sons Martial Arts, which is what I teach. And the third exercise is moment, moment. Awareness, balance, and then we get to moment. And a moment is what we call infinite, and it's infinitely wide and infinitely short of duration. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, you can get lost in the moment. And what happens? Time goes on without you. What happens when you go to sleep? Time goes on without you to a large degree. You can do a temporal pacing as you're going through a dream. And then as soon as you wake up, it's gone. You're not on that timeline. And so that's why everybody talks about, oh, what time it is. Well, to me, that's a million questions need to be asked. Where are you? And how are you? And where'd you come from? And where are you going? And how are you getting there? And of course, it all comes out to no, it's at 5 o'clock somewhere. And now we're back to Jimmy Buffett. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Take a break, go have a beer or whatever it is that causes you to clear out the cortisol and dopamine you've been drinking for the last 8 hours. Save yourself. That's what it amounts to. Now, one last exercise. If you really want to know what time is, take up night fighting. PK Salat, Indonesian or Philippine martial arts. If you step in a ring and you have a knife and they have a knife, I guarantee you, as soon as the bell goes off, there's no such thing as time. It is gone. Okay. There's something in its place, but it's something that most people don't experience: time dilation, ratcheting down. Everybody experiences up tempo, but when you slow things down, people hate it. It's another exercise. I teach sun salutations. Inhale up, exhale down. It's about 10 moves, each of them with a breath. So one night in class, I decided to teach it as a 1 minute hold on each exercise, each movement. So it became a 10-minute exercise. And then the next class, I upped it to 3 minutes. So one salutation becomes 30 minutes. People are screaming. Why? You don't like holding still. Why? Time moves. That's it. So to be able to hold yourself still is one of the highest martial arts. It's also a sniper's art. Can you assume stillness? If you're a hunter, if you're a martial artist, if you're an assassin, can you assume stillness? And that becomes the ultimate teaching when we go into like a martial arts teaching for battle.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. Podcast guest Nick McKinley's company, Deliver Fund, brings you guys Thrivers Coffee. It is ethically sourced, it's organic, and it supports traffic survivors. That is right. Thrivers Coffee is all about empowering us to making a difference in the fight to end human trafficking. That's why 100% of the proceeds go directly towards their goal of bringing freedom to victims of human trafficking. So if you guys love coffee that is organic, ethically sourced, and tastes absolutely delicious, and want to help to end the fight of human trafficking, check out Nick McKinley's company, Thrivers Coffee. So funny you say that because, the box breathing, and then you inhale, hold, exhale. I go, and people always ask me, like, what's your favorite breathing exercise? I'm like, can't do anything with the hold. They're like, why? And I go, because I can't hold. It's stillness and it's just not me. I want the inhale, exhale, the movement. Give me the movement. Don't give me the hold. And that's so funny that you say that. I maybe need to start working on my stillness.
Yeah. The thing about stillness as an exercise, you enter into a state of harmony first and then eventually a state of serenity. And what that means is you're no longer either aware or involved in time itself.
Interesting. I like that.
It literally is the basis for spirituality.
I clearly need to get into stillness. I mean, as you were talking to, I just started to do like the breathing. I was like, 1, 2, 3, everything feels fine. And I'm like, hold. And then I did 1 second hold. And the moment I get to 2 seconds, I'm like, this isn't for me. Go back down. I definitely need to work on that. I'm curious if other people feel that way. If other people, what your opinion and feelings are about time. And if you want to reach out to Randy for any work with yourself, energy wise, things like that, I think you're amazing at all this. The exercises that you give me, I, I mean, are life changing. Like I said, I was able to stay neutral in when things were happening. So and all of your contact information is below in the show notes so they know how to get a hold of you. Also, your website to look further into you and what you do because I find you so invaluable and the stuff that you bring to the table is so insightful that nobody else brings. So I appreciate you being on the show again.
Well, thank you very much because we covered a lot today.
Yeah.
I call it a basis for beginning because it gets crazier. Not to get into it at this time, but there you go. So thank you very much for letting me try to explain some of this. All right.
Thank you. And everyone that's listening, please like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Substack member for those extra goodies that only our Substack members get. And I will see you guys all next Wednesday. Thank you.